Another update on the Forester. Everything's been well so far, no complaints. And I got a Wilco off-road Hitchgate Solo high clearance. And that's what I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about today. Give you some impressions on it and how well it's working on this particular setup here. These have been kind of popular in the past year or two with a lot of cross-trek guys, outback guys. Not so much in the Foresters. You don't see them that much just because I feel like the people that do this, as I mentioned before, are mostly like outback and cross-trek owners for some reason. But anyway, let's talk about the Wilco off-road Hitchgate Solo. So this thing's pretty cool. It is a 2-inch hitch receiver, so any vehicle that has like a 2-inch hitch, you're good to go. You can just kind of mount it in, and it has what I would describe as like a V-block that when you tighten it, the pieces kind of come together like this. It snugs it up really well, so there's really not much movement, or really any at all, really. It's actually pretty darn snug, and that's kind of what I was really happy to see about it. But basically, once you get it set up in the hitch, you're good to go. Kind of put it together, release pin. Right here, you just drop that. It's on a cable, and then you can swing this out. And it goes to a little past 180 degrees there. So let me turn the camera here so you guys can actually see it kind of open all the way, just like that. And it goes a little past 180, which is nice. It doesn't hit the vehicle, at least on this model. Obviously, it's going to vary a bit depending on how wide your vehicle is. And then we have a couple options here as far as extra stuff. I have the Rotopax mount, which is basically this piece of metal here, and then this will mount a high lift jack. So I don't have a whole lot of use for a high lift jack, but now that I do have a hitch and the Hitchgate Solo, it is definitely a nice jack point, so I may get one for that reason. We'll see. And to close it up, just do the opposite. Swing it closed here. It's kind of a bump stop, and then put your pin back in and you're good, and it's not going anywhere. So my a couple notes on this thing first of all, before let's talk about the accessories last. So a couple notes first. You'll notice down here I mentioned that I do have the high clearance model. So the standard model just comes out as your 2-inch hitch right here, and bam, you got your hitch. It doesn't come up at all. This goes up, I believe, about 4 inches here. So depending on what type of vehicle you have, Wilco says that you should really start considering the high clearance if your hitch point is relatively low below your lift gate. And here's my lift gate for my cargo area, and then of course here's my hitch. But if you have a hitch mount that is mounted higher up, maybe it's in your bumper like a lot of vehicles, in fact the newer, I think 2019 and up Crosstreks have them, you don't really need the high clearance. So if your hitch is down here, you're probably going to want the high clearance. In fact, I would say if you have a Subaru that does not have a built-in hitch like the newer models, you're going to want the high clearance. But if you do have an updated model, you can go with the standard, and it comes out about where this one is actually. You don't have to worry about this, which can potentially affect your departure angle and stuff like that, but it is what it is. We don't really have any other hitch options for these because on these models, they're not built in. So that's the high clearance model. Adds a few extra pounds. As a whole, the thing is steel. It is, I believe, 54 pounds even, according to Wilco. That's without any accessories and stuff like that. So I have, we do have a hitch point here, as you can tell. This is still a 2-inch hitch, so 2-inch down here, 2-inch here. I have a factor 55 hitch link 2.0 in there. So you still have a hitch point, which is nice. I'm not sure why they decided to put the hitch point here, because you could just as easily put it down here, you know, instead of lifting it up. I'm gonna guess they're probably assuming that if you're lifting it up, get this notification out of the way, if they're lifting it up, then you probably want your hitch point a little higher. I think the only downside to this for someone like me would be that this is kind of an odd angle right here. So instead of pulling straight, if I'm towing or wanted to recover from this, or you know, recover anyone else, you know, I have this kind of odd angle. So I think it's still fine. It's a class 3 hitch, and these things are tougher than even the weight of this vehicle can even pull, or tow for that matter, I believe. So it's not a huge deal, but I don't love that this is not in line with the hitch, and I think that's my only little complaint about this particular setup here. Moving to the license plate here, as you can tell, the tire and pretty much everything is centered on the vehicle, as it should be. Covers up your license plate. So I kind of threw just like a little Back to the Future plate in here, because no one's ever going to see it unless I'm stopped and it's open. Just kind of a little nerdy thing there. So you got to move your license plate essentially. They do have a license plate relocation bracket, which goes right here in this hole. But I don't like how it sits with the high clearance especially. So what I did was I ended up getting a tow hook relocation plate. And there's a bunch of companies that make these. This is kind of a cheap eBay one. And that's where it is for now. I do have a temporary light set up here, again, for the time being. Basically like a solar light sign. It charges from the sun, obviously, and there's a switch to turn it off or on. And it will only turn on when it's dark out. So if I'm driving at night, which I don't do very often, again, for the time being, I can just flip that switch and I'll get some direct light on my plate and be fully legal. So that's the other note here. I would say for most vehicles, getting something like this, you are probably gonna have to relocate your license plate because again, it's centered right in the vehicle. So the back up here, you can get a full view of the rear. Looks pretty awesome, which is kind of another pro to this. So it does look cool, but it's totally functional because I cannot fit this full-size spare in my cargo area where the donut was, because these come with a donut in the US. So that's why. So I'm either left to put it inside the vehicle somewhere, take up cargo space, or relocate it to the rear, usually on the roof or somewhere on the hitch. Let's talk Rotopax. So what we have here is a Rotopax high lift jack carrier. This is an accessory. Again, all steel. It is pretty hefty. I have it mounted as low as I can, as you can tell here. So basically brackets to this main beam by 4 bolts, and then you can move it up or down. I have it as low as I can get it there, and she mounts pretty well. I like the height. It does block my rear view camera a bit, but so does the tire here. So that's another consideration as well. You may want to relocate your backup camera, but as low as I have this mounted, which I'll talk about mounting again here in a second, it doesn't really take up much of my view. So it's not much more than like the center headrest actually. So you know, it's about there. I have a pretty low here, so not super low that it's going to interfere with the tow hook point, but it is. I should note there that we are getting to the point where if I lower my tire anymore, we're going to start potentially interfering with a tow if, you know, the vehicle is sitting lower and my recovery tow point is higher. You know, we'd have an upward angle that could potentially impact the spare, but I think that's kind of a stretch. Anyway, coming back to the Rotopax here, I have a Rotopax 3.5 gallon. Again, this is a 2015 Forester. I've seen a variety of different Rotopax sizes on Subarus like this. This hitch point is out as far as it can be, so it cannot go out any further. And this 3.5 just barely touches the Subaru emblem here. So it seems fine for now. I just got done moving it out of here. See if I go like that. I can shake it, kind of, you can actually see a bit of light there. My concern is that it's gonna start making noise and banging when we get on some bumpy terrain, but I guess we'll play it by ear, see how it goes. Again, 3.5 gallon. So this differs from the other options that I have here. This is a 2.5 gallon, or sorry, 2 gallon. This is about the most narrow. And this is what I was really hoping to use. I didn't know if it was gonna fit, and definitely doesn't. Well, it does, but it touches the vehicle. So even more so than the 3.5 gallon. So the 3 gallon is a little bit wider than the 3.5. So the 2 gallon is kind of taller and narrower. That fits in there perfect. There's like an inch or so between the Subaru emblem and the tank. But the 3.5 gallon here is between the two in the width or depth, a little bit wider when I have it mounted this way, and it does fit. So if it is annoying, I'll pull it off, put the 2 gallon back on. I don't need a ton of fuel. After all, it's a 4-cylinder motor, so I don't need 5-10 gallons or whatever. It's nice to have. I'd like to have a little bit more than 2 gallons, but you know, I can't fit anything bigger Rotopax wise than the 3.5. So it's either gonna be 3.5 or 2 gallon for me, and we'll just kind of roll with this, see how it does, and if there's any issues, I'll come back to it. So last but not least is mounting of the tire. I ended up using my own hardware for this. I went down to like Ace Hardware. You can probably go to your local hardware shop, and I bought some studs that are in the same bolt pattern as my wheels on the vehicle, the studs on the vehicle. So that means I can use my extra studs that I have laying around, and not only that, but if I needed an extra one for any reason, I have extras, and I could go to 1 or 2 depending on how you end up doing your mounting. So I actually have one in the back side of this that you can't see, that's facing the other direction, just as like an extra kind of stowaway stud and stowaway you know, lug there. So what we have here, as you can see, the backing plate where this is mounted to is relatively high in the center of the wheel. Again, I mounted this basically as low as I could go. So spaced these studs out, locked them on with a jam nut and a Loctited them on, so we're good to go there. I could turn this up one more, so I could kind of go up, like if I pulled this lug out and rotated it up, we could actually get these two to fit in this position, which would mean instead of having three, or 1 to 3 on the top side, you'd have 4 on the top side. You'd have 1 on the bottom. So you could actually do 3 on the bottom in that case, if you wanted to do 3 wheel studs. But, and again, you'd have an additional one there, but it does sit a little higher. The only alternate that I've seen, and I've actually did originally, was there is a slot at the top of the mount up here, and you can put this piece about right here. So, you know, that's a good 2-ish inches or so. It does sit a lot higher. It's going to raise your center of gravity. It's going to get rid of any, you know, issues down here, of course. But it was a little too high for me. It took up too much view. It didn't like the center of gravity. It didn't like how it just looked as well. And also, when you have it here, because of the odd bolt pattern, it's relatively small for this mount. It's a 5x100 pattern. This mount up here, there was nothing that would mount directly below it. So you have to can it off to one side, left or right. So you'd have one here and one here, or one here and one here, kind of, if that makes sense. So again, I dropped it down, went with this. If I have any issues here with clearance, I think what I'll do is just raise it up a hair, so that way we're using the 3 on the bottom instead of these 2 here. So you have some options, but it's going to vary depending on how high you want this to mount up. You'll have to get a little bit creative potentially, but I think there's 2, and then plus 1, so 3 technically really good options for this type of bolt pattern. So I think that's about it. A couple quick notes here, and I'll be done. This thing did take about 7.5 weeks to get to my door. There is a bit of a lead time on these. They've been kind of popular in the past couple years, like I said, and I think they're trying to play catch up for the supply and demand. So again, Wilco Off-Road, they're about, I'll let you look them up on the website, because it depends what, you know, accessories you want to add and stuff like that. So prices are going to vary depending on if you want the Rotopax carrier, the relocation for the license plate kit, and stuff like that. So I'll let you look them up, and there's a couple different places that sell them. But lead time for me, they said 4 to 6 weeks. I ordered from not Wilco directly, but a different company, and they told me that, and it arrived in about 7 to 7.5 weeks. So my only complaint with the arrival was, you know, it's one thing that it takes a little bit of a lead time. I know about the lead time, but they did forget to include the main pivot bolt on the swing arm, and all the hardware that goes along with that. And they did forget to include the hardware and the lugs to actually mount the tire. So what I went out and did was purchased a bolt from like a local hardware store like Lowe's that worked, and it got me going just for the time being, before they shipped me another one and it showed up. So and then they also sent me the hardware for the wheel to mount up, but I was already using something else that for me works better anyway, so I wouldn't have needed that in the end. But I've heard of other people not getting 1 or 2 of those pieces of hardware too. So just check your stuff, make sure that you have everything included if you're ordering something like this, and go from there. So at the end of the day, it is, for me, on this setup here, I like it much better than having to mount the tire to the roof, raising the center of gravity. If I don't want to run a roof rack or a carrier or something like that, I don't have to, and I can save mileage. In my experience, the tires, the tire diameter, the weight of the tires, and the lift as a whole aren't even close to the MPG hit that you get from starting to put stuff on the roof. So in my experience, the more stuff on the roof, the harder of an impact it's going to take on your MPGs than the other options or the other things there. So I like that I can mount it behind the vehicle, and yes, it is added weight. It's, you know, 54 pounds for the Hitchgate. Then you add on weight for the hitch itself, and then the tire, which is about 52-ish pounds, wheel and tire. So yeah, it is what it is. Weight adds up quick, but if you don't mind it, you know, it's a good option. So at this point, I'm just gonna run with it and roll with it and see how I like it, and I'll keep you guys updated in future videos if I change anything out, like that Rotopax. If it does end up rubbing and making more noise than I really want it to, that's kind of my only real concern at this point. Again, it is touching that emblem, but just so slightly. I don't know if it's gonna rattle when I get enough movement back there or something like that, and I don't want it to be wearing off like the emblem, you know, material or something like that, you know. So I'll keep an eye on it, see how it goes. I'll keep you guys updated. But yeah, other than that, I like it. I do have a power lift gate, so I kind of got to get used to not just hitting the power lift gate. I haven't done it yet, but there is the Rotopax there to stop it. I don't want to hurt the motor, so I would imagine there's some type of built-in, you know, safety that when it feels resistance, it immediately just stops anyway. But I do have to, you know, get back there, pull the pin, open the hitch gate, and then hit my button to open the power lift gate. So kind of a bit of relearning of opening that, but no big deal. And of course, that is to be expected. So if you guys got questions, give me a holler. Let me know, answer them the best I can. I bought all this stuff myself and threw it on. You know, none of this stuff is sponsored or anything like that. So no worries. Check you guys later. See ya. Quick look during some low light. Light's not bad. I was hoping I'd get more light from these up here, but definitely not. So I'm glad I have this, at least for the time being. This is like a little cheap sign light and solar LED. So looks a lot more yellow in the camera than it does in person, but I'll link this as well as everything else below. So if you guys are looking at doing something like this and you want at least some type of a setup, a light setup here, you can at least flip this on at night manually. Just switch them here. There it is. And if you are at night, it'll be legal and good to go for the most part. So it seems to be pretty solid. I've been driving around with this on for about a week. It's gone nowhere. Actually drove about 300 to 400 miles on the highway this past weekend, so